If you've ever received an invitation to one of Cartier's Fifth Avenue Mansion events, it's possible you tried a cocktail curated by New York mixologist Jena Ellenwood. Jena is an award-winning bartender, cocktail educator, and writer whose work has been featured in countless publications, including Forbes, iHeartRadio, and she's curated menus for special events at Cartier, Macy's, and the American Friends of the Louvre, to name a few. We sat down to chat about her background, amazing experiences, and spring entertaining, whether or not you're a drinker. So I know I found this conversation so incredibly helpful, and I hope that you do too. Enjoy! Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host and the founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's Silver. All right. Well, hello, Jena. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Why don't you go ahead and, I did a little intro, but tell people about you, how you got into mixology, what you're doing right now. Just give us a little bit of a background on you.
Sure. So my name is Jena Ellenwood. I have been based in New York, actually in this apartment for the last 17 years. I've been in New York for 20. Like a lot of performers and creatives, I needed to figure out how to pay bills, right? So when I was in school for performance and creative writing, I started as a barista. We had 100 kinds of loose leaf tea. I started to really get into learning about tea. We had one of these really big, like the Beauty and the Beast ladders.
Like the bookcase?
Yeah, we had the bookcase, but it was all these drawers of tea. So I started to really learn about tea. And then when I left school, I transferred to their other property, this tea, coffee, and martini bar in Hartford, Connecticut. It's called Tisane, which is herbal infusion, is what it means. They transferred me to their beach bar in Old Lyme. And they told me I could run the margarita station. And I thought that was going to be more exciting than it was.
As you said it, I was like, what a gig. That sounds fantastic.
It wasn't even frozen. It was just like a dispenser for crappy margaritas. And then they asked me where my bikini was. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But I will learn how to wait tables. So I did. And then I realized that the bartenders were having more fun. So there were these two dudes whose names were Chad and Rico, who used to be male entertainers who really loved body oil.
Oh my gosh.
And I asked them how to make cocktails, and they said, if you don't know what the drink is, make it pink. And don't forget to flag it, which means like put a piece of citrus on it.
So like just garnish it, essentially.
Yeah, garnish it and make it pink if you don't know what it is. So, and this was like the early 2000s. And I was like, you know what? I think that there's more to this. So I did what I've always done. I read and I started taking classes. So I took a bartending class and I learned how to free pour, learned all the cocktails. And then no one would hire me because I was 20 and a woman. So I could be a hostess, I could be a server, I could be a margarita girl, but I could not become a bartender. And then one day the day bartender needed coverage and they let me fill in, and then they realized I was faster, and they caught me with a fork in my hand and a lime in the other. And they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, the sour mix is awful. Like, I'm not serving that. So we didn't have a juicer, but I was juicing limes with a fork because I was refusing to send out something. And they were like, all right, well, she's still faster. I guess that's okay. And then I moved to New York and kept working in the industry, but once again, no one would put me behind the bar. So I fell into craft beer, and I stayed in craft beer for a really long time. I learned a lot about beer, read a lot about beer, taught a lot. I still teach a lot about beer. Then I wound up working at a little bar in Queens called the Sparrow Tavern, and I started playing with flavors. And there were 2 other women on staff, and the 3 of us wound up making the cocktail menus together for many, many years.
Okay.
We started playing with syrups and infusions. I started reading more, and I learned how to fat wash and make weird things. And I would play with the kitchen staff and see like what they had that I could use, like their salsa verde see what worked in a cocktail. And it came from a very culinary place.
I was about to say it sounds very, very like kitchen experimental. It's, yeah, very cool.
Yeah. I mean, today, for example, I'm covered in glitter. You can't see it, but I'm covered in glitter because I'm finalizing a recipe that I was hired to make for the totality.
Okay.
So I'm currently like testing stuff in my kitchen to make it look and taste because, the moon is going to, the moon's going to black out the sun. So
Yep.
I'm trying to see how I can do that with flavors, but it always happens in my kitchen. And then I wound up competing. My first competitions were for Bloody Marys, which is also a very culinary thing. And I have a big Italian heritage. I learned a lot of cooking techniques from my aunt. My mom's really big into pickling and preserving. So I took a lot of those things and applied them. And then I just kept running with them everywhere I worked. And I worked at several different programs. I also ran a New York focused tasting room for a long time where we only carried New York ingredients. So if I wanted something and we didn't have it, I had to figure out how to make it. If it wasn't from New York or if it was too expensive for us to have on the menu because we were so tiny, I had to find a way. Make my own vermouth. I was making
Wow.
shrubs. I pickled blueberries. I did some weird stuff and it worked. Like some of the stuff worked. Some of it was really tragic. And to this day, like if I can't figure out how to get there in the kitchen, I'll get there through a book usually. Like I will research my way into the recipe. If it seems like there's some sort of historic fact that can lead me somewhere, or the history of one ingredient shows the story of another, I will start tying them together to make recipes work.
Can you give me an example of that where you needed to refer back and look at historically what's something that you were able to use for reference?
So I actually have several. After coming out of working in Queens almost exclusively for a really long time, I worked in Brooklyn for a little bit, and then I wound up working for YJR Group, so Dear Irving and Raines Law Room, and I'm now the cocktail educator for Dear Irving and Raines Law Room. So that's what I do for them 4 times a month. I also teach a green market class there, which is super culinary. The first drink that I got on the menu there, I was inspired by food. That's usually how I get into it. I think about what I want to eat. And I was thinking about mango with chili spices, but I started to think about other things behind the bar that work. I wound up tying together French and Mexican ingredients, and the cocktail pays homage to Frida Kahlo. She was the first Mexican artist to have a show at the Louvre, and they kept calling it a surrealist debut, even though she wasn't a surrealist painter. So the cocktail is called the Surreal Debut, and it was inspired by the food item, but that's how I got there. And I also, around the same time, I was getting ready to compete. I had submitted a recipe based on a woman. It was called the Toast to Her Story competition by Marie Brizard for Tales of the Cocktail. And you had to embody an inspiring woman in your cocktail. I looked at their portfolio and I saw that they had a yuzu, and that kind of spoke to me a little bit. And I wanted to use Japanese flavors. I kept thinking about these pickled umabushi plums. My friend Brianna from college, her grandmother, Mary Namora, is known as the songbird of Manzanar. And Manzanar was an internment camp during World War II. Mary spent several years there, I believe. Several years. There's a documentary which chronicles her time there, but she was a singer. And I know her based on her food. So I started to research the flavors of where she was in California, but also where the Japanese flavors tied in.
Okay.
And wound up creating a cocktail based on that.
That is so cool.
When a couple years ago, Cartier hired me for their anniversary party, but they wanted everything based on their jewelry. I didn't know a lot about Cartier going into it. I do now. I did a lot of research and I was able to find flavors from where their jewelry lines were
cool.
Inspired. Yeah, so they were inspired globally. There's a bunch of different global lines, and I was able to use stuff kind of as a through line to tell their story in flavors and colors and textures. And they had I got to wear the jewelry in case you ever. It feels
amazing.
Like
if you ever need an assistant, let me know.
I was like, this is my college tuition on one finger. Sign your life away too. But being able to research the area and the historical elements around it, even if it doesn't seem like it appears in a bottle form, there's usually something that does. And a lot of flavors exist in multiple cultures and cuisines.
That's very interesting because you're approaching it from a space. Now, this is not at all my background, but I do cook. It's interesting to hear that your approach to mixology is not so unlike any other recipe. Very similar methodology, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, try and try again and write down what you do. That's
Yeah.
so I have like
Steps.
notes in my phones. Yeah, notes in my phone just to see like what the trial is, right? Because otherwise you'll forget, you think you won't, but you will. It is a lot like cooking, but caveat, when I'm cooking, I am not measuring.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So it's more like baking and less like how I make my pasta sauce. I can make a soup with what I have. I can just throw it
Right.
in. I can taste it. I keep going. That's not how you achieve balance in a cocktail, right? Or how you're able to get bread to rise or cookies to work, right? You need to have the right
Hmm.
ratios.
Yeah, there's no handful of or two preference. No,
Yeah,
it's
it
very
doesn't work
precise. As much garlic as you want. There's none of that. Yeah, no.
unless you're making a Bloody Mary, which I happen to have won awards doing. So that, I mean, I do
Okay, more garlic. Noted.
unmeasured, but like, yeah, that's
You're a good, you sound like a good authority on this. We have your word. More garlic is okay.
or garlic is totally fine. Uh,
Perfect. I
multiple
love it.
species of garlic. You could roast it, you could pickle it.
Yeah, see, look at you go. I would never, I would be like, well, just this is what we have. I think there's a revival of hosting, entertaining, even the cocktail party. But what I think has kind of happened with, I'm 32 years old, like my generation, our whole age group, is that we've become so accustomed to pre-made, to just grabbing beer, wine. You might have some liquor around. We tend to do a lot of entertaining, but have a lot of things that are pre-prepared and not really always that good, because they're super sugary, they're mixes, or we're just serving beer and wine. And those are great options to offer. But I was thinking about it the other day that like my grandparents' generation would have people over and be able to offer them a mixed drink without hesitating, and they would know exactly how to prepare it and exactly how to ask for it if they went out. I don't have that. I have every now and then, like we'll have like a little house drink if we have a party and it's something that's in a pitcher and it's mixed and then I don't have to fuss and, serve people all night. But if someone came to my house today and they asked me to just like whip them up the perfect blah, 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 I'd have to Google it. And even when I go out sometimes, if I want to like try a new drink and I don't have a menu in front of me, I'm lost. I have to look online or I have to ask their suggestions. So I was really interested to speak with you because I don't know if that's something that I don't feel like I'm in the minority.
You are, I mean, you guys are also kind of the lunchable generation,
We
maybe. Like,
were the lunchable
but
generation.
this is by no means the most pre-prepared packaged food generation. So
Hmm.
there's a couple parts to what you just said that I love. That I talk about quite frequently. When it comes to hosting and pre-prepared stuff, y'all, by the way, there are some really amazing products out there that are pre-done cocktail or ready to drink, RTDs, right? There
Hmm.
are some really great things out there on the market that make your life easier if that's the route you want to go. My friend Lynette Marrero did one with J-Lo that's quite lovely. Like there are some things out there that are really, really great. And they're made by my contemporaries and my mentors. So I can say that there's attention to detail and these aren't the prepackaged drinks of earlier generations.
Yes.
Two, never be afraid to ask the staff, right? This is something that Dear Irving and Rain's Law Room we're trained in. This is something that I spend a lot of time doing. It's called Bartender's Choice. We came out of the milk and honey ethos of bars where there is no menu, right?
Hmm.
So this is something that has taken me around the world because a few competitions that I've been in have really been about my ability to thrive in reading another human being and giving them something that will work for them. So they know their menus better than you do. If you're like,
Right.
hey, I have a question, they will always be down to talk to you, unless they're like four deep at the bar, in which case read the room and get a glass of wine or a beer, right? But if they have time, have a conversation. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is what my day has been like. I'm allergic. That's big. I'm allergic. And that's really, really helpful. When it comes to preparing stuff for home use, I used to teach an intro to party hosting class. I actually like had a special punch bowl. I did a whole thing and then we kind of stopped hosting, right?
Right.
I love hosting. I love pre-batching, but I also love building stations. So that way
Okay.
you aren't stuck making drinks all night. Like an old fashioned station, a spritz station, a Collin station, things that are really easy that people can just whip up. They don't need shakers, just put out a jigger for each thing and a couple options and maybe I did this for a friend's 40th birthday. Actually, she lives in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
So she's in Bethlehem. I designed her wedding cocktail years ago, and I just designed her 40th birthday drinks. She had little frames with how to prepare them. All the pieces were there if they weren't pre-batched. She was going for kind of a morbid funeral to her youth.
Funeral. Yep, I've seen it.
Yep. So I did funeral drinks. She wanted black and red drinks. So
Okay.
the drinks were black and red, and each thing in the frame was like, put it on this ice cube or put the rim on it this way. Just things that were really easy. What I will say is important to do ahead of time is to pre-cut your citrus so you have twists and you're not giving knives to people who are drinking.
We're all about safety.
Yeah, all about
Thank you.
safety.
Pro tip.
Yeah, my fingers have been glued back together, and that was sober. That was just
Oh.
even the next generation below you is very interesting to me because they're not drinking.
That is a whole separate conversation, but yes.
What I've noticed, and I say this a lot in my cocktail classes for Dear Irving and Rain's Law Room, people are always like, what's the next trend? I think it's the educated consumer. I think that makes everyone's world more delicious and enjoyable because we know what we're getting, right? We know how to read a menu. I started doing a class last year called Intriguing Spirits, and it's basically about things that people are afraid of. They don't know what cachaça is or pisco. You don't know what Pinot de Charente or vermouth. You're like, I don't understand these words. What are they?
I recognized about two.
Okay. So I started doing a class specifically tailored to that so people could walk in and feel empowered. I think a lot about like how my family interacts with alcohol and which is entertaining. But my mom is not a big drinker, neither are her sisters. I always think like if I can explain stuff to them the way that they would understand it, then I've succeeded, right? I had to explain barrel aging like tea bags. And once I explained like how barrel aging on whiskey works and like the strength of the barrel or like the age of the barrel equates to the tea bag, you get the flavor extracted. That made sense to them.
You made a very good point, and I don't mean to interrupt, but the word empowerment, I feel like sometimes people take for granted how helpful that can be when we're talking about, I mean, anything really, but to understand, because, and this is a part of my life I would prefer to forget, but when I was in college, I worked for kind of a rowdy sports bar, and I occasionally would have a beer, but I really had to know the whole menu. You know, I had to sample things, and like I had to be able to just describe like flavor profiles, know what glass things went into. And to this day, that is still so helpful when I walk around a beer distributor, or if I'm, you know, with family and someone's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. And it's to be able to refer back to some of that knowledge is actually so much more helpful than I ever would have thought, because here I thought I was just trying to like pay my way through college.
I mean, beer is a great example, right? Because you're able to know when you read the descriptions or where it's from, right? West Coast IPA versus New England IPA. All right, I know I'm going to get into a different kind of hop here. There's a different kind of haze. And I get texts all the time from friends that are screenshots of menus. Am I going to like you know what I like? And I'm like, all right, well, how about I teach you what you like? And then you can go out and like find what you like. I mean, I know that I'm the easy go-to on that, but what if I'm not available? You gotta figure it out, right? But
sacrifice
also,
the taste buds.
I say this a lot too, like your taste buds are your taste buds. I'm not gonna make you like Brussels sprouts if you don't, but you don't know unless you try them. And being able to have a vocabulary for them is also super useful, and that's something, you know, the beer and hop flavor and profile wheel came a little later. The wine aroma wheel was actually created by a woman at UC Davis. Her name was Ann Noble. Before that, we didn't have a vocabulary to talk about what we were smelling and tasting in wine. So unless you were a wine professional, it was really difficult, right? Because some of these words were really sciencey. People weren't gravitating towards that. So what Ann Noble did was create something that kind of made it more accessible for everybody. And now we see that. And there are wheels for beer, for malt, for hops, coffee, agave distillates. So you can go and have those words and you know what they are. You need those descriptors when you are thinking about a spirit or a beer or cocktails or spices, right? Like the Scovilles. Yeah. But you can't just look at me and say, I want something that's smooth, because by definition, a liquid is smooth. There are no short bedrooms. So that's not
Yeah.
telling you what you really
Doesn't
want.
really narrow the list.
Yeah. Do you want something that's like super herbal or something that's sweet, something that is spicy? Also, you mentioned, our grandparents' generations hosting. I mean, maybe yours are probably a little younger than mine. Both of my grandfathers were World War II vets. We're looking at this kind of timeline, but when you're also looking at that generation and the generation right around there, you're looking at a generation that grew up for the most part during Prohibition. And
Yeah.
the advent of the grocery store really taking off and things that were
Hmm.
packaged and shelf stable is also in that time frame right around the 1940s when we
Yep.
start to like things like packaged sour mix, like Spam, right? Also, the idea of entertaining changed a little bit. Like, do you know why beer comes in six pack?
No.
It's because a marketing company decided that that was the number a housewife could comfortably carry. The number of beers a housewife could comfortably carry home.
Wow.
Also, back in that
Wow.
period, there were already, they did sell for a long time pre-bittered sugar cubes. Like you need to expedite your old fashioned in a different way. That they
Okay.
had them already done. So the idea of hacking your cocktail and making ready to drink things isn't something that's super new. We're just starting to notice it again. The dude that's really responsible, like the company Cube Line, based in Hartford, they were advertisers. They were responsible for A1 steak sauce and the advent of the Moscow Mule in 1941 because they imported vodka, but they also created ready to drink cocktails around
Interesting.
that time. So this is something that did exist. We just notice it more now because, hey, the internet is everywhere.
Were people able to get their hands on a bottle of wine as easily as they can now? Like, did we have spirits stores and wine sold in store? Like, was there a reason
What time
people,
period are you looking at here?
like maybe 40s, 50s, even 60s? I mean, 60s feels a little later, but
There were stores, yeah, there were stores, and
okay.
they later wound up having them in grocery stores too, like the six pack of beers. But it also depended on regionally where you were. So you're in a very interesting state because your liquor stores are state run.
Yes.
Liquor laws are so interesting in this country.
One of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was one, if you have any ideas for kind of going back to that, I would love to know how to, if someone dropped by, have kind of a well-stocked bar, certain drinks that are not necessarily even the recipes for, but like go-tos that are generally crowd pleasers. Even if you're someone who doesn't really drink and you want to have things available to people who pop over, if you're entertaining, especially as we get into warmer weather, what are like some go-tos for people that are easy, that you don't have to have things that would go bad too quickly, or, like you could kind of keep around?
When you're building a home bar, you got to think about what your goal is, what you want to make, how much you drink, what you like, what your friends like, what your budget
Mhm.
is. But a few things to really think about when it comes to entertaining and how you can make multiple things out of a few things. I think having spirits that are easy to execute in variations of a Negroni or an old fashioned are great, and things
Okay.
that work well in like sours. So like a Tom Collins or a margarita, these are all related. When you're looking at cocktail family trees, everything either comes out of that old fashioned line or that sour line. And we will think
Okay.
it's like a margarita. Some of my go-tos, especially when it gets warmer out, are things that you don't have to think about and things that are equal parts because I don't want to do extra dishes. I live in an apartment. I really like to make white Negronis.
I've never heard of that. Okay.
All right. So a Negroni is equal parts, right? One part gin, one part sweet vermouth, and one part Campari.
That
And
I've done.
yep, so that's easy. If you swap out these parts, right? And you can do that. You could swap out the gin for tequila or mezcal, works great. You could swap it out for bourbon that you've got a Boulevardier. This kind of whole family will make you a lot of different drinks. Plus, then you've got Campari if you want to do a Campari and soda. You've got sweet vermouth. Vermouth, by the way, lives in your refrigerator. It will go bad once you open it. So keep it in the fridge. But then you've got vermouth and your base spirit. You can make Manhattans, variations on martinis. You can make a Martinez, which is my favorite classic cocktail. But if you are going to do white Negronis, you swap out that Campari element for a white bitter. So Suze is great. It
Okay.
is a French gentian liqueur and it's bright yellow.
So is that citrusy?
Gentian is something that shows up a lot in like tonic. It's a bittering agent, but it is like a bright kind of, yeah, like more grapefruit pithy in its flavor.
Okay.
And swap the sweet vermouth for a blanc vermouth. So a blanc vermouth is slightly sweetened. I also like to have a blanc vermouth around because it's great with soda. It's great on the rocks with an orange twist and an olive, like how they serve in Spain. But then if you have gin, Suze, and a blanc vermouth, you've got a white Negroni. You could start swapping it out for mezcal or tequila on that variation. And that's a really fun thing to have pre-dinner. And they look really pretty because they're like a bright saffron yellow.
Ooh.
And I like to do it with a grapefruit twist. But you can use all of those elements, like a Suze and tonic is also great. And then you have a couple different pieces to play with, right? If you have those things, and then you've got citrus and simple syrup. Simple syrup is just equal parts sugar and water. You don't even need to heat it up. Put it in a mason jar and shake it. Keep it in the fridge. It's fine. Whoever decided to like bottle and sell that is an evil genius. And I wish I thought of it, but I didn't. So if you do simple syrup and lemon juice and club soda, you've got a really nice lemonade. But if you take that and you add gin or a vodka or whiskey with the club soda, you've got a Collins. If you omit the club soda with the lemon, you've got a sour. If you want to swap the lemon juice out for lime juice, you are a hop, skip, and a jump to margarita. But you're also really within the same realm of like being able to make a daiquiri. If you've got rum, you could make a Ricky, which is essentially the same thing as a Collins, but with lime. And then once you bring in your orange liqueur, you've got orange liqueur, tequila, lime juice, you've got your margarita.
So it's really just about swapping. There's a lot of swapping.
Yeah, in these cocktail families. So if you're looking at the old fashioned Negronis over here and then the sours, you can really just play with these parts and the ratios pretty much stay the same when you look at them. The building blocks pretty much stay the same. So it makes your life really easy to just have these things on hand and just know how the puzzle pieces fit together. Like think about your measurements like your Legos. All right. So if you can change the color if the size is the same.
Right.
And you'll be able to make something.
I love that. As we get into warm weather, entertaining, being someone who does love a lot of fresh food and cooking, if we want to talk about good flavor pairings for more traditional seasonal foods when you're grilling, what are good flavors there? Or if you're doing a lot of garden or fresh fruits and vegetables, what pairs well with that? But then also, what are really good ingredients that tend to be seasonal that tend to make just like a really standout drink?
So when it comes to pairing grilled flavors, fresh flavors with things, and this is going to vary regionally based on availability because I know that I'm super spoiled. So I live in Queens. We have the most diverse food community in the United States of America. We are the world's borough, but I also know that we import so many amazing spirits and wines, right? I have access to all sorts of stuff. So your story is going to be a little different. I absolutely love blanc vermouth spritzes with grilled food and garden food. Also sherry, manzanilla sherry. Something that the Spanish really do. Yeah, I really love. Sherry is made for food, right? It's made to have with food. It gets kind of, this is Grandma's silver, but Grandma kind of gave it a bad rap, and that's because it was cream sherry that we were so used to thinking about. And then we kind of fell down the rabbit hole of thinking that sherry was elitist and Fraser's fun and all, but Sherry Niles kind of made us feel like, oh, I can't do that. But really, if you're in Spain, it's everywhere. For the summer, and I just wrote an article on this for the Crafty Cask website. So if you go to the Crafty Cask, I have an entire breakdown on white wine spritzers.
Okay, I can link to that. I'll find it. I'll grab it from you and we'll link to it in the show notes so people can go check it out because that feels appropriate.
Yeah, it just popped in my head. So there's no shame in my white wine spritzer game because I love wine. I love bubbly water, but it's hot out. When it gets hot out and you want to kind of pace yourself throughout the day, it's good to kind of have that layering of hydration in there. Plus it plays so nicely when you're out in the garden. Other things that go really well with grilled food, depending on what you're grilling. I'm pescatarian, so I can't really speak to how my palate works with a lot of other flavors, but I know that fresh seafood, I like things that are a little bit lighter and more herbaceous. It could be a lot of fun. I like to play with garden herbs. And don't over muddle your mint or your basil. That's how you make it bitter. It just needs a little like press to release the aromas. Taking those things and putting them in a Collins, using your herbs in there, making a rosemary simple syrup instead of just a plain simple syrup. Using that, you can make a pitcher of that and you can make it non-alcoholic. I did that for Thanksgiving. I made an herbal lemonade and then you could add the booze in later. So the kids could have it too. Because not everyone in my family drinks and we do have a lot of kids. So to make the pitcher, the non-alcoholic mixer part, and then
Mm-hmm.
wherever
Spike
it
it
is,
if, yeah.
yeah, you add it in there at the end. So that way it's a little more versatile. But anything with like some nice bubbles and some nice bright herbaceousness to cut through the char. I would also
Okay.
probably go for some beer because I am a big beer fan and I like to buy whatever's around. That's how I like to
Like
travel.
local, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
like to try whatever's around me. So that way it's kind of like being able to have a glimpse into their food cuisine too.
Mm-hmm.
When you are doing grilled elements for cocktails, super fun to char some peaches and maybe do some like peach and basil whiskey smashes,
Yum.
which is a really, really easy cocktail to do. You just need a bottle of whiskey, some sugar, some peaches. I like to use basil, and then a lemon, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You smash it, and then you shake it with 2 ounces of your spirit, and you've got a cocktail.
That's awesome.
I have some
Such
videos on,
good, like such a good flavor combination too.
yeah, peach and basil. I have a video for that on my Instagram that I did during
Okay.
I did a lot of
Perfect.
this. Charred pineapple. Yeah, charred
Yum.
pineapple with a margarita, a
Okay.
mezcal margarita, charred pineapple, a little chili. I'm also kind of famous in my friend group for my booze melon. I really like to take a little mini watermelon, use a melon baller, and then put it all back in with some mezcal or tequila, some fresh lime juice, a little salt, and maybe some mint or cilantro, and let it soak overnight and bring it. But just make sure it's labeled
So no
boozy
one's
melon.
grabbing. Yeah,
Yeah, and then
absolutely.
you can have it with skewers, and you've got a little fancy feeling shot if you want.
Okay.
Since it is getting warmer out, we are going to start to see more berries, and berries are just so easy to integrate, minus the blueberry. That gets a little difficult. It gets a little like odd when you muddle it because the skin
Okay.
break down.
I could see that. Yeah, I feel like I've tried to do something with blueberries before, and it's like unless you're making a simple syrup out of it and like cooking it down. Yeah, I know
Or
it
you use
doesn't muddle, right? Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
fine strain them. You can use like a tea strainer, but when it comes to raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, that's great. Cucumbers, you could do a cucumber in your Collins or in your Ricky, and that's just delicious because it's bright and it's fresh. Cucumber plays with gin so well. Also plays really well with tequila.
Okay,
So even if you're
really?
just
Okay. See, I'm not a big tequila drinker, so I wouldn't have known that, but that is good to know because I entertain a lot of tequila drinkers, so that's perfect.
and super easy. I have kind of a multi-step summer corn recipe that wine enthusiast ran. I can send that to you. It takes a couple steps because you've got to make a corn syrup, but it is delicious. And corn is just so sweet. I mean, you can muddle it too. Corn has so much flavor in there, right? And corn is everywhere. And it's great when you like slightly char it because in the summer that's just summer, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's like that
especially
grilled smoky
corn.
flavor.
Yeah.
So one of the other big questions that you actually sort of touched on earlier is that so many people are not drinking now. And sometimes you just aren't in the mood for alcohol. You just want something that you can go to that is more than water. It's not a soda.
Sure.
How do you put together an elevated mocktail that goes beyond just adding carbonation to juice?
So I have another article that I will send you that we can
Yes.
actually a couple. I just gave an interview to Forbes today about the same thing.
Amazing.
Popular topic right now, but I wrote one and I interviewed a lot of other bartenders on what they do. And there are so many really amazing non-alcoholic bottle shops out there now that have some really great stuff, things that have adaptogens. So if you want to feel calmer or if you want a little pep, right? That's all there.
Mm-hmm.
That's its own special category. There's non-alcoholic wines, non-alcoholic spirits. If you want to get into mixing that, I can talk to you all day about it because what you're really looking for is a layered, balanced flavor experience, right? And you
Right.
don't just want to feel like you're drinking a Shirley Temple.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So and if you don't want bubbles, because that's always a fun one when you're like, no bubble, no carbonation, no sugar, there's a whole list, and you're like, well, what do I do?
Right.
I I like to use tonic syrup, not tonic water, but there are tonic syrups on the market that add a nice little bitterness to things. That's kind of what the non-alcoholic bottle shops have too, because you're not looking just for the bubbles. You're looking for a lot of things that alcohol provides, right? There's a burn, there's a feeling of relaxation, there's a different layer of flavor, like there's a depth of flavor, right? So that's what we're looking for. You can achieve that in so many other ways. And to default to my experience, you can do it with tea, different kinds of iced tea, right? You could use your black tea or your green tea. Or if you want to get really funky with it, lapsang souchong, because it's a smoked tea and it stands in really, really well for things like whiskey, scotch, or mezcal.
Oh, how
And you can
cool.
put that in cocktails. Yeah. I did a whole mezcal class for Spotify during shutdown, and most of them did mezcal, but a few of them were not drinking. So we did a swap with lapsang. So that way everyone could still have the recipe, but not
Right.
be drinking. Just to fill in those little elements. It doesn't have to be bubbly, and you could still create that sensation of having a special moment.
I love that. And that's so helpful, especially as someone who hosts. Most of my family doesn't drink. We have plenty of friends who don't drink. And I'm at an age where I have a lot of pregnant friends. And so sometimes you want to entertain and alcohol isn't the focus, but you still want it to be elevated and you don't want to just like hand out sodas or sparkling waters. And so what can you do that still makes it special and part of the experience?
Also,
That's
shrub.
not shrubs. Okay. So this is like the vinegary, right?
So shrubs are a very, very old colonial way of preserving, and they're drinking vinegars. And it was a way of preserving fruit and all sorts of things, and that you could keep enjoying them. I have designed wedding cocktails where I wanted them to be able to go both ways, right? So you could use
Mm-hmm.
me and not make the caterers crazy. So I snuck in a few different things to these cocktails to make sure I did that. For one of the weddings, the groom wanted a Mai Tai, and I was like, I can't in good conscience give a wedding party a Mai Tai.
No.
So I was like, this is not going to happen. So I made a caramelized pineapple shrub.
Oh my gosh, that sounds good.
I had all of these flavors of caramelized pineapple shrub and coconut water and pineapple juice. And you could mix it with club soda or have it on its own, and it could be completely non-alcoholic. Or you could mix it with the rum, but I was still secretly hydrating you. And then at the end of the night, I was able to give the bride
As a former wedding planner,
coconut,
I
yeah,
commend
coconut
you.
water. And I was like, chug this, like you're going to be okay tomorrow.
That is such a good kind of going back really quickly to the summer entertaining. That is the perfect poolside
Yeah.
option.
And shrubs don't go bad. You keep them in the fridge, but the vinegar preserves it. A raspberry white balsamic shrub is great with vodka, great with gin, great with just club soda. You could add it to a little bit of sparkling wine, but that one's super versatile too. You could do a blueberry shrub if you don't want to deal with the skin,
Yeah.
right? So that's a really great thing too to get those flavors. And there's several different ways to process shrubs, the cold method or the hot method. But once you've got them, you have more, crayons in your crayon box to pull colors from that you can, and it has that vinegar burn that you think
Right.
about a little about alcohol, right? So it triggers that response. And
Do you
also like
use them, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but a shrub, do you use that as you would like a simple syrup where you're just taking like a little bit of it and mixing it into something?
I would use it more like an acid, like a citrus.
So a little bit more.
Yeah, like a little bit more. I would use it definitely a little bit more than I would a simple syrup. It's a great little back pocket thing to have, especially if you like to be in the kitchen.
And that's the thing. Like, I love to use seasonal ingredients. I know a lot of our followers, listeners are also like minded. We're trying to use up, and especially now, so many of us like garden and go to the farmer's market, and to be able to use ingredients you might not have otherwise reached for, or that you have excess of. We're all looking for ways to like use up our basil and our mint all the time in the summer.
Yep.
So those are perfect ways to just infuse them and use them in, your drinks too.
If there's other stuff that you see that you're really excited about, like when ramp season hits, right? Everyone goes through the roof for ramps. I buy them and I pickle them so I can make ramp Gibsons. So that way I have them as cocktail garnishes. And
Okay, I have no idea what a Gibson is.
a Gibson is like a dirty martini,
Okay.
but with a pickled onion.
Oh, so okay, I've seen it. Then I just didn't know the name. Look at
Yeah,
that.
and like it got kind of a bad rap because the pickled onions on the market just look so like maggoty. Like they're white and gross and they're just like sickly. But if you make your own, right, with like red pearl onions like we do at Dear Irving, or if you want to get ramps or fun with like little cipollini onions, you can really make your own stuff that is delicious and beautiful and elevated and just lives in your fridge. I did the same thing with the fiddlehead ferns too, and then you have like a really cool little garnish. Or my sister works on a kelp farm in Connecticut, and they do pickled kelp stipes. And those are great in a dirty martini too, because they look like green beans, also great in a dirty martini or a Bloody Mary. But it's just the little finger looking, green bean looking part of the kelp. And when
Okay.
you've got a really satisfying garnish.
We're coming up on the end here, anything else that you felt like would be helpful for people to know or that you want to share?
I have a few things that I'm really excited about, and I always update everything on my Instagram at jenna.lane, and I update my website as much as I can. I am about to see my first cocktail recipe in a book.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So that comes out April 30th. It's called A Quick Drink, and it is a book put out by Speed Rack, which is an all-female cocktail competition, speed competition. I was New York top 8 in 2018, and they are putting
Amazing.
out a book, and I'm really excited. I got to see the proof the other day. So that will be available this spring and summer. I will always be putting recipes, videos, and links to my articles on my Instagram. If you have any specific questions, feel free to shoot me a DM or check out my website. If you have any sort of events or need help cocktail planning, I am available for hire for those. If you're looking for cocktail design, if you're in New York, you can always check out the classes at Dear Irving and Rains. They're in person. I am available for virtual as well.
Thank you, Jena, so much for being here. We really appreciate this conversation. It's been so much fun, so educational. And for those who want to check Jena out and all of her amazing upcoming opportunities, we'll have that listed in the show notes, and I'll be sure to share it to Instagram soon as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie.